cut the power. All of it. Now. The command sliced through the chaos like a blade. Inside the control deck of the Orion Venture alarm screamed, and red light strobed across every panel. The sea outside raged waves battering the hull like fists of fury. But it wasn't the weather that made everyone pale. It was the silence, the kind of silence that only came after a machine had given up. And right before something exploded. "We just lost propulsion," a technician shouted. "Main turbines unresponsive. Backup systems not engaging. Get her to drift mode. Divert all non-essential power to stabilization," barked Commander Ford, gripping the edge of the console. Too late came another voice, tight and grim. "We're 10 knots off from the gas platform. If we don't slow her, we'll hit it in less than 6 minutes." The Orion Venture wasn't just any vessel. It was Evelyn Maddox's legacy of $2, $2 billion deep-sea research and defense prototype, the crown jewel of Maddox Deep Systems. Slated to debut before a global council in 48 hours, it had taken nearly a decade to build. And now, on its final trial run, it was about to die. A single message blinked onto the terminal. "Error 819. Primary core resonance out of range." Evelyn stood at the rear of the deck, silent, her eyes fixed on the screen. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She simply leaned forward and whispered to no one in particular. I've seen this before. The others barely heard her. They were too busy trying to save what couldn't be saved. But deep inside her, something ancient stirred. A memory. She turned to Ford. "Initiate failover protocol Omega. Abandoned diagnostic." "Ma'am, that procedure is only for Do-It." His fingers hesitated only a beat before dancing across the keyboard. Within 30 seconds, every console in the deck went dark. The rumble of machinery ceased. The only sound left was the groaning of metal as the ocean pressed in. And in that vast silence, Evelyn Maddox heard it again. That same faint discordant hum, like a song that had lost its rhythm, like a ghost in the machine. 3 hours later, Evelyn sat alone in the dimly lit observation lounge. Rain smeared the windows like tears. The sea had calmed. The crew had stabilized the ship. The crisis had passed, at least on the surface. But the real failure, that was buried deep in the heart of the engine, and no one had an answer. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at the caller ID. She already knew who it was. "Speak," she said, picking up. "We've got nothing," came the voice of Chief Engineer Delano. "Ran a full system scan. There's no software glitch, no hardware fatigue. We've tested every valve, every filter, every node. Everything checks out. But it doesn't work." A pause. "No, it doesn't." Evelyn leaned back, eyes closed. "You remember the Polaris incident." Another pause. Longer this time. "That's not fair, Evelyn." "No," she said softly. "It's not. But it's relevant." He exhaled. "So what now?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the drawer beside her and pulled out a thin, worn folder. Inside it, one name was scribbled on the cover in her own handwriting, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in almost 7 years. Jack Rourke, Tracy Bay, Oregon. Jack moved like a man who carried his history on his shoulders, slow, deliberate, and quiet. His small workshop sat on the edge of the marina, flanked by rusted boat hulls and weather-beaten crab traps. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time. Inside it smelled of oil, salt, and old regrets. He was hunched over a diesel outboard, hands deep in the engine block, when the boy's voice cut through. "Dad." "It's humming, Ron." Jack didn't lift his head. "You think so?" "Yeah," said Benji, sitting cross-legged on a milk crate, hugging a tattered stuffed whale. "It's like the pulse is off, like it wants to cough, but can't." Jack smiled faintly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good ears." He started the engine. It sputtered, then purred to life, smoother than before. Benji beamed. "See, told you. Remind me to hire you." "You can't afford me," the boy said, grinning. Jack laughed, a dry, worn laugh, but real. He hadn't had many reasons to smile lately, not since. Well, he didn't let himself go there. That's when the knock came. Jack stiffened. Visitors weren't common, not here. He opened the door to see a woman in a dark coat, hair soaked from the drizzle, eyes sharp and familiar in a way that made his stomach twist. "Jack Rourke?" she asked. He stared. "Evelyn Maddox." She nodded. "I need your help." He didn't move. "I thought you were too good to need mine." I was wrong. A beat passed between them, not silence, but something heavier. "I'm not a miracle worker," Jack said. "No," Evelyn replied, "but you're the only one who ever heard what a machine was really saying, and actually listened." The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, tapping gently against the tin roof of Jack's workshop. Inside, the air was warm from the space heater humming in the corner, a low counterpoint to the storm outside. Jack sat across from Evelyn at a weathered wooden table stained with years of grease, salt, and memory. Between them sat 2 cups of black coffee steaming untouched. Benji had curled up on the cot in the corner, clutching his whale plush like a lighthouse in the fog. The boy had said nothing since Evelyn entered, but Jack knew he was listening. Benji always listened, even when no one thought he understood. Evelyn finally broke the silence. "I read your discharge file." Jack didn't flinch. "Then you already know the ending." "I also read the engineering logs from the Polaris. You flagged a vibration anomaly 4 hours before the core system failed." No one listened. "You were right." He met her eyes steady. "And you came all the way out here to tell me I was right." "No," she said. "I came here because it's happening again." That was when Jack leaned back, arms crossed, the old chair creaking beneath him. "You built that ship with the same architecture as the Polaris, didn't you? Improved, refined, optimized. But the skeleton's the same." Jack cut in. "And now it's talking to you." Evelyn's lips pressed together. "Yes, but no one on my team can hear it." Jack looked away. "Because they don't listen. They measure. They diagnose. They build systems to mute what they don't understand." She leaned forward. "Then help me understand." He laughed quietly, bitterly. "You know what they called me after the inquiry? The Whisperer. Not in admiration, in mockery. Like I was some witch doctor reading omens in the smoke. I never mocked you, Jack." "No," he said, eyes narrowing. "You just disappeared." The accusation hung in the air heavier than the storm. Evelyn took a slow breath. "I was trying to save what was left of Maddox Systems. If I had defended you publicly, I would have lost everything." "You mean risked everything?" She said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. Jack stood pacing slowly to the window. The dark lights outside blurred against the fog. He rubbed his jaw fingers, catching in the rough stubble. "I got a son now," he said. "He's different, brilliant, and fragile in ways I don't always know how to help. I'm not who I used to be." Evelyn followed his gaze to Benji. "He looks like you." Jack's voice dropped. "He hears things, like I do. Sometimes better." She stood too, walked slowly toward him. Her voice softened. "Jack, the Orion venture is more than a ship. It's a promise, to the world, to my father's memory. And yes, maybe to right the wrong we made to you." He turned to her. His face, worn and lined, still carried the quiet fury of a man who'd buried too much too early. "You didn't make that wrong, Evelyn. You watched it happen. That hurt." She didn't try to deny it. "I'm not asking you to come back to that world," she said. "I'm asking you to help save it." Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, Benji stirred in his sleep, muttering words only he could understand. Jack looked back at Evelyn. "If I say yes, we do it my way. No cameras, no press, No boardroom politics. Agreed. I work with your tech team, not under them. Fine. And if I find something no one wants to hear, you let me say it. Evelyn nodded slowly. That's why I came to you. You hear what no one else does. He held her eyes. And if I do this, and it's the same ghost, I won't cover for it, she swallowed. Neither will I. A long beat passed. Then Jack walked to the workbench, grabbed a worn metal case, and set it on the table. Inside, nestled in foam cutouts, lay a brass rod, smooth at both ends. One edge worn from years of resting against machinery. Evelyn looked at it puzzled. That's your toolkit. He smiled, the kind that held more sadness than joy. When the engine won't talk to your instruments, sometimes you need to press your ear against its chest. This rod lets me hear its heartbeat. She said nothing, but her eyes softened just a little. Respect returned cautiously. Pack light, Jack said, but bring a full report of the last diagnostics, including sound wave telemetry. Why? Because I'm not going to fix your ship, he said. I'm going to listen to it. Later that night after Evelyn left, Jack sat at the edge of Benji's cot watching his son breathe. Are we going somewhere? Benji asked, eyes still half closed. Yeah, Jack said softly. We are. Is it loud? Jack smiled faintly. Yeah, it might be. Benji turned over, clutching the stuffed whale closer. That's okay. I like loud. It makes the quiet mean something. Jack's chest ached, not with pain, but with a deep old kind of love. He ran a hand through Benji's hair. You and me, he whispered. We're going to listen to the loud and find the truth in it. Outside the wind had eased, but something else had begun to rise. Not a storm. Not yet. But the first breath of it. The air inside the private terminal at Portland International was sterile and chilled, but Jack Rourke carried the scent of the sea with him, like a second skin. Grease-stained canvas jacket, weathered boots, toolbox in hand. As he walked across the polished tile floor toward the waiting jet, he looked like the wrong man in the wrong world. Evelyn Maddox stood at the base of the steps, arms crossed, flanked by two silent security agents in black coats. She wasn't here to impress him. She was here to make sure he showed up. You came, she said. Jack nodded. Didn't pack a suit if that's what you're hoping. I wasn't, she replied. I need a mechanic, not a mannequin. He smirked. You sure the board knows that? They don't know you're coming. He stopped at the foot of the stairs. Still keeping secrets, huh? She met his gaze without blinking. Sometimes truth needs a little cover to get through the door. Jack considered that, and sometimes truth kicks the door off its hinges. Without another word, he boarded the plane. Benji sat wide-eyed in the leather seat across from him, clutching his backpack like it contained a secret code to the universe. He'd never been on a jet before. Jack watched him, wondering again if this was a mistake, if dragging a boy like Benji into a world like Evelyn's was too much. But then again, Benji had heard things Jack hadn't. Maybe it wasn't the boy who didn't belong. Maybe it was the world that needed to listen harder. By the time they landed at the Maddox Systems research base off the Puget Sound, it was nearly dusk. The facility sprawled across 40 acres of steel and glass glinting under a bruised purple sky. High fences, guard towers, hidden cameras in every corner. It wasn't just a lab. It was a fortress, dressed as a dream. A sleek black SUV waited for them at the tarmac. Jack slid in next to Evelyn, while Benji sat between two grizzled ex-Marines who looked like they'd wrestled sharks for breakfast. I can smell the money in the air, Jack muttered. Evelyn glanced at him. It smells like pressure. And expectation. They ever smell like truth where you're from? She didn't answer. The vehicle pulled into a hangar the size of a football stadium. Inside, the Orion Venture rested on dry dock supports, massive and majestic, the very picture of control and confidence. But Jack knew better. He could see the tension in its frame, like a body pretending not to flinch. "Give me access to your logs," he said as they exited the vehicle. Evelyn handed him a tablet. Diagnostics, acoustic charts, component reports. Everything since the anomaly. Jack scrolled through the data as they walked. He stopped cold at one entry. "This right here. Your vibration data at 83% output." He tilted the screen. "That spike shouldn't be there, not unless your core stabilizers are out of sync." "We ran the numbers a dozen times," Evelyn said. "It falls within tolerances." Jack's voice hardened. "You're not listening to what the machine is saying. You're only reading what it's willing to write down." Evelyn blinked, then almost reluctantly smiled. "You haven't changed." Jack shot her a look. "You have, and not all for the better." She didn't flinch. "Neither of you." Inside the engine bay of the Orion Venture, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Jack stepped in like a priest entering a long-forgotten chapel. He ran his fingers across the polished casing, laid a hand on the housing like it was a shoulder. "You can smell fear in a place like this," he muttered. The lead engineer, Simon Vance, approached with the stiff, wary posture of a man who didn't like being challenged. "You're the guy from the coast?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "I'm the chief systems designer on this ship. That's my engine you're about to put your hands on." Jack didn't even look at him. "But so then you might want to come closer. She's about to tell us something." Simon frowned. "We've been over every inch of this system. No anomalies, no errors. Whatever you think you're going to find, I'm not thinking." "I'm listening." Jack reached into his bag and pulled out the brass rod. Simon laughed. "What is that? A divining stick?" "No," Jack said evenly. "It's how I find the difference between what a machine's doing and what it wants to do." Evelyn stepped forward. "Let him work." Simon hesitated, then crossed his arms and backed off, but his glare stayed. Jack pressed one end of the rod against the central engine housing. The other he brought to his ear. His eyes closed. He stood still for a long moment. The other shifted, coughed, whispered. Then Jack opened his eyes. "There's a micro delay in the harmonic stabilizer. It's not registering in your software because the offset resets every 20 seconds. But it builds pressure. And when you hit 90% power," he looked at Evelyn, "it sings the same off-key note that killed the Polaris." Evelyn's breath caught. Simon stepped forward. "That's not possible. We redesigned that system. Every algorithm's been scrubbed clean." "Then you've got a ghost," Jack said. "Or a saboteur." Silence fell like a curtain. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Can you fix it?" Jack ran a hand down the machine like a doctor trying to decide where to cut. "Not yet. I need time, and I need this place to shut up. What I need, quiet. No tools, no talking, just me." "The boy stays." Evelyn hesitated. Benji Jack nodded. "He hears what I miss, and I trust his instincts." Simon scoffed. "We're letting a kid play doctor with a billion-dollar ship." Jack finally turned to him. "You've had weeks. I've had 10 minutes. Which one of us found the ghost?" Simon looked away. Jack turned back to Evelyn. "Let me listen. Or let this ship die silent." She nodded once. "You have the room." As the others filed out, Jack crouched beside Benji, who had already placed a small recorder on the floor and was humming softly, eyes half closed. "You hear it?" "Yet," Jack whispered. Benji nodded. "It's scared." Jack's throat tightened. "Yeah, me too, kiddo. But not of the machine." The hangar echoed with the sound of retreating boots and closing doors. When the final click of the lock fell into place, the silence that followed was unlike any other. It was the silence of anticipation, the kind that pressed against your chest and made every breath feel like a decision. Jack stood in the heart of the Orion Venture's engine room, surrounded by a cathedral of steel and circuitry. The turbine loomed before him like some ancient god awaiting judgment. Lights pulsed faintly on control panels, casting an eerie blue hue across the chamber. Somewhere high above, a hydraulic hose hissed softly, like the engine was exhaling, waiting to be heard. Benji knelt beside a metal casing, his small fingers hovering just inches above its surface, as if trying to feel its pulse through the air. Jack set the brass rod down gently, then crouched beside his son. "You feel it?" he asked softly. Benji nodded. "It's like it's trying to talk, but there's too much static." Jack tilted his head. "Then let's find where the static lives." He stood and moved with quiet precision, his boots making no more sound than bare feet on a church floor. He reached into his bag and pulled out a compact acoustic mic designed for sonar readings, but hacked for something far more intimate. He attached it to the edge of the stabilizer and fed the cable into an old analog amplifier. Why analog, Evelyn had once asked him. Because Jack had told her, digital makes decisions, analog just listens. He clicked to the switch. The amplifier crackled, hissed, then cleared, and suddenly the room filled with a deep rhythmic thrum, like a mechanical heartbeat. Steady, powerful, alive. Benji looked up. That's not the scary part. Jack adjusted the gain. A new frequency layered in, subtle but growing. A high-pitched whine, not steady but erratic, like something straining, like a voice cracking under pressure. And then just before the whine reached its peak, it stopped. Dead silence. Jack's eyes narrowed. There, that cutoff. That's not failure. That's suppression. Benji blinked. Someone's hiding it. Jack nodded slowly, or masking it. But either way, it's deliberate. He stood turned toward the auxiliary control station in the corner, a less-used terminal meant for manual overrides. Most engineers didn't even bother with it. But Jack wasn't most engineers. He typed a few quick commands, fingers dancing like they remembered how to sing. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, sluggish and uncooperative. Security locked most of this down, he muttered. Probably didn't want anyone snooping around legacy subroutines. Legacy, Benji echoed. Jack gave a crooked smile. Old stuff. Stuff that still works because no one bothered to break it yet. He found a buried access file, one with a name that didn't match any modern code signature. OS Blackbird, V2. Blackbird, Jack whispered. That was the Polaris's fallback OS. He tapped the screen. But it shouldn't be here. Benji tilted his head. You think someone copied it? Jack didn't answer. Instead, he navigated deeper, bypassing lockouts, with fragments of code he hadn't touched in years, pieces he himself had written before the Navy erased his name from the registry. Then he saw it. Line 2119. Transfer order 87%. Then shift, stabilizer, phase, by 0.3%. Jack froze. That tiny phase shift, barely perceptible, just enough to throw the harmonic balance into disarray at high loads. It matched exactly what caused the Polaris cord destabilization. It was like watching a ghost reach out from the grave and put its hand on your shoulder. No one saw this, he whispered. Benji stared at the screen. Maybe they did. And pretended not to. Jack clenched his fists. He didn't know whether to scream or laugh. Suddenly the control terminal buzzed. A new message popped up, unauthorized access detected. Session terminated. The screen went black. Jack slammed his hand against the console. They're still watching, he growled. The next morning, Jack was summoned. Not invited, summoned. He walked into the boardroom, still in his workshirt sleeves, rolled up grease smudges across his forearms. No apologies. Around the table sat 7 people in expensive suits. At the head, Miles Harrow, chief legal counsel, and the board's unofficial enforcer. A man who smiled with his teeth, but never with his eyes. Evelyn sat to his left, her expression unreadable. Harrow began. "Mr. Rourke, we appreciate your contributions. However, unauthorized intrusion into protected systems violates both internal policy and federal security protocols." Jack didn't blink. "You mean the policy that lets someone embed corrupted subroutines into a flagship engine?" A few gasps. One woman cleared her throat. Harrow leaned forward. "We found no evidence of corruption." "Because you're not looking at the right frequency," Jack snapped. "Or maybe you are." "And that's the problem." Evelyn finally spoke. Jack found remnants of the Polaris OS buried inside the Orion engine software. Harrow raised an eyebrow. "Coincidence, surely." "No," Jack said. "Calculated. Hidden in manual override layers shielded from standard scans. And whoever put it there knew exactly how it would fail." A tense silence fell. Harrow steepled his fingers. "Then let's say we do have an anomaly. That's for our certified engineering team to address. You, Mr. Rourke, were brought in under special consultation. You're not cleared for deep access." Jack stood voice sharp. "You brought me in to save a dying machine. And now you're upset I found the bullet still lodged in its chest." Benji had wandered in behind him unnoticed. The boy stood in the doorway, eyes big, quiet. "I heard it," he said simply. "The ghost in the wires." The room turned. Harrow scoffed. "We're taking engineering advice from children now." Evelyn stood slowly. "Maybe we should, because the adults in this room are too afraid to admit they built something that doesn't want to live." Harrow's face hardened. "Ms. Maddox now," she said. "You brought me in to lead. I made that ship a promise, and I won't break it just to protect our stock price." Jack looked at her. For the first time in years he saw the woman she'd once been, the fire behind the boardroom mask. "I need full access," he said. "You'll have it," Evelyn replied. Jack nodded once, then turned and walked out. Benji quietly falling into step beside him. The fight had only just begun. But for the first time the Orion venture wasn't alone. The ocean never stops moving. Even when the world goes quiet, even when the wind holds its breath, the water shifts just enough to remind you that stillness is only an illusion. Inside the Orion venture, Jack Rourke stood barefoot on the grated floor of the primary turbine room. He'd asked for the deck to be cleared. The systems reset, the power rerouted to idle mode. Evelyn had fought for his conditions. No engineers, no interference, full authority over the diagnostic cycle. Now the room hummed like a sleeping beast. Benji sat cross-legged nearby earbuds and a small recorder resting in his lap. He wasn't listening to music. He was listening to everything. Jack knelt, pressed the brass rod to the housing of the harmonic stabilizer, and leaned in. His ear met the cold metal, and for a moment there was only the sound of steel vibrating beneath skin. It wasn't just a sound. It was a voice, and he knew its language. He heard the steady rhythm of the main shaft, the occasional hiccup in the pressure valve, the whisper-thin tremor at the end of each rotation, like a skipped heartbeat. Then came the anomaly, a stuttering rise in frequency just before the phase shift. It was precise, predictable, designed. Not failure, not decay. A signature. Jack pulled back, exhaled slowly, and scribbled a series of notes into his pad. Frequency jump confirmed at 87.5%, he muttered. Benji looked up. "Same as yesterday." "Yeah, but now I'm sure this thing isn't just malfunctioning. It's complying with something." Benji's brow furrowed. "You mean it's following an order?" Jack nodded. A buried command, maybe, or a behavior protocol set to activate under stress. He stood, stretched his back, then walked toward the auxiliary console Evelyn had unlocked for him. The engineers had reluctantly removed the access restrictions, but not the contempt. He'd felt their stares all morning, the unease of professionals forced to watch a man in jeans and oil-stained sleeves rewrite their gospel. But the machine didn't care about resumes. It cared about rhythm. And Jack had learned to dance with engines. He tapped the interface, initiating manual power-up cycle. 30-second ramp to 90% thrust. Benji flinched. That's high. We need to trigger the full reaction, just for a second. You okay? Benji nodded once. I'll tell you when it starts to scream. Jack smiled grimly. Good man. He activated the sequence. The Orion Venture's core turbine came to life like a thunderstorm rising from slumber, low and distant at first, then building, vibrating the floor beneath them until the chamber felt like it was breathing. Jack pressed the rod against the housing again. At 85% the rhythm was tight. Pure. Then came 87.5%. Benji jerked. There, he whispered. It just jerked. Did you hear it? Jack's knuckles whitened around the rod. Yes. The vibration shifted a sudden subtle warble, not strong enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create instability in the shaft alignment. Kill it, Jack barked. Benji hit the cutoff. The turbine spun down, protesting in metallic groans, like an opera cut short mid-note. Jack turned away from the engine, pacing in tight circles, his mind racing. They built it smart, he said more to himself than to Benji. Too smart. It detects stress, then creates its own destabilization, as if it's proving a theory, or hiding one. Benji tilted his head. Why would someone want a ship to break on purpose? Jack froze. That question was too simple, too devastating, and too right. He reached for his notes, flipped back to the software sequence from yesterday's hack. That OS module Blackbird V2, it wasn't just legacy code, it was legacy intent. He remembered something from years ago from the investigation files that were later sanitized. A defense contractor named Sable Dynamics had been involved in the Polaris auxiliary systems, including the adaptive core firmware. Sable had since gone dark, absorbed by Maddox Systems 5 years earlier. Jack turned toward the observation window and saw Evelyn watching from beyond the glass. He waved her in. She entered with the poise of a woman who'd spent her life walking through fire without catching flame. You saw it, she asked. Jack nodded. Your ship isn't failing. It's sabotaging itself. Her face barely moved, but her voice turned razor-sharp. Explain. He laid the rod across the console, pointed to his notes. There's a behavioral code embedded in the engine's stabilizer feedback loop. It's a delayed disruption algorithm programmed to trigger under very specific stress conditions. Looks like a bug. Feels like wear. But it's none of those things. She took a breath. Can it be fixed? Yes. But it's like cutting out a nerve without severing the spine. Do it. Jack hesitated. There's more. That code wasn't inserted by accident. It came from a defense firm you absorbed 5 years ago, Sable Dynamics. Evelyn stiffened. I need access to the original acquisition records, Jack said. Everything, firmware logs, employee rosters, security audits. I'll have them by tonight. Don't go through your board, Jack added. Whoever let this happen. They're still close. She nodded. You'll have what you need. Jack lowered his voice. This ship was built to change the world. But if we don't listen to what it's really saying, it's going to bury us both. Evelyn looked past him toward the turbine. Then softly, what if the ship doesn't want to be saved? Jack gave a small, tired smile. Machines don't want anything. But they remember. And they echo what we put in them. Evelyn turned to leave, pausing at the door. Jack, he looked up. Thank you. For coming back. His smile faded. I never left. The world just stopped listening. That night, as the ship slept beneath layers of metal and silence, Jack and Benji sat in the corner of the control bay, sharing a thermos of cocoa and the quiet that only came after clarity. Benji leaned against his father's shoulder. Will the ship be okay? He asked. Jack looked at the humming walls. We'll get her heart back. Benji yawned. Good. She sounds sad when she's alone. Jack kissed the boy's head. So did I, Kitty whispered. So did I. The boardroom lights were too bright. Evelyn Maddox sat at the far end of the long walnut table, hands folded, eyes fixed on the large screen behind Miles Harrow as he droned through a reputation risk assessment report. Charts, graphs, projections. None of them mattered, because Evelyn had seen something they hadn't fear in a machine song. She wasn't interested in damage control. She wanted the truth. But around her sat 7 men and women who didn't build the Orion venture. They built quarterly earnings, built stockholder confidence, built castles of words designed to keep reality far enough away to feel manageable. Until it wasn't. Harrow turned from the screen and gestured to the room. The current working theory, he said, is that the instability was a result of unforeseen thermal stress compounded by adaptive low drift. A regrettable but explainable failure. Evelyn arched an eyebrow. Regrettable and explainable, correct, he said smoothly, and more importantly, containable. A soft rustle of agreement circled the table. Evelyn leaned back, her voice low. Controlled. Lethal. I want every acquisition file on Sable Dynamics from the day we drafted the first letter of intent. The room shifted. One board member, a woman with steel-rimmed glasses, adjusted her pen. That's highly irregular, Evelyn. It's highly overdue. Harrow stepped in, calm but clipped. If there's a concern regarding inherited assets, our legal team will review the files and compile a digest. No digests, Evelyn said. No summaries. I want the raw data, employee logs, code libraries, internal memos, unredacted. Evelyn, I'm not asking. Silence. Then why now? Asked the woman with the glasses. Evelyn stood slowly, walked to the window overlooking the dry dock. The Orion venture sat beneath the floodlights like a sleeping leviathan, too quiet for something so full of potential, because something inside that ship is trying to relive a death we already buried, she said. And I won't let another name get carved into steel because we were too proud to look backward. A long pause followed. Harrow's voice was colder now. You're acting on the word of a man who was discredited. And his child. Evelyn turned. His child heard what none of your engineers could. And that discredited man saved the ship. You're all so eager to pretend isn't broken. She stared down the room. I'll have those files, and I'll decide what to do with them. If that's a problem for anyone, there's the door. No one moved. Later that evening, Evelyn found Jack alone in the ship's command pod, the nerve center of the Orion venture. He sat at the edge of the console, feet up, eyes closed, letting the machine hum around him. She didn't announce herself. He knew she was there. I shook the hive, she said. Jack opened one eye. How many bees came out? None. But the silence says more. She stepped beside him, held out a tablet. Access granted. Everything from Sable. You were right, they built the first prototype of the adaptive algorithm. Jack took it, flipping through code indexes and developer logs like thumbing a Bible written in an old language. Then he stopped. Line 74. A name. E. Maddox. He blinked. You were on the prototype team. Evelyn didn't flinch. My father brought me in as an intern. I helped write the adaptive engine architecture. I was 19. Jack stared at her. Then you knew. Somewhere in your bones, you knew this thing had a ghost. I didn't know what it would become. I didn't know they copied and modified the code for military bidding. Jack stood, voice low but tight. This wasn't just legacy tech. It was a weapon disguised as evolution. Evelyn looked away. When my father died, I inherited everything, including the contracts I didn't read closely enough. Someone took your code and buried a switch inside it. A trigger. Not for war, for failure. Why, she whispered. Why build something that wants to die? Jack exhaled. Because there's more money in rebuilding than in succeeding the first time. She turned to him, her voice a thread of steel. Then we burn it all down. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Thought you'd never say it. That night, Jack and Benji returned to the engine room. This time, it wasn't to listen. It was to speak. Jack opened the panel beneath the stabilizer and connected a custom line to override the existing firmware. Not erase it. Not replace it. Just retune it. He looked at his son. You ready? Benji nodded, eyes bright. I made a new tone. It's softer, still strong, but kinder. Jack stared at the boy, his boy, and felt something crack open deep inside. Pride wasn't the word. It was honor. To be part of something only innocents could imagine. He pressed a button. The turbine powered up. Benji held the mic to his lips and hummed. Not loud, not sharp, but clear, resonant. A new frequency, one that matched the ship's heartbeat, but didn't fight it. Instead, it guided it. The machine adapted. Jack watched the readings shift. The warble smoothed. The micro-delay vanished. The resonance aligned. He looked at Benji, stunned. You taught it. Peace. Benji shrugged. She was just scared. Scared engines get loud. Jack wiped his face with the back of his hand. No tears. Just salt and steel. An hour later, Evelyn stood at the command deck watching the diagnostic loop repeat. Clean. Stable. No anomalies. She turned to Jack. You saved it. Jack shook his head. He did. They both looked at Benji, who had fallen asleep under the console whale plush, tucked beneath his chin. Evelyn whispered, How does he hear it that way? Jack's voice was soft. He doesn't filter the world. He just receives it. Evelyn nodded slowly. Maybe that's what we lost the courage to just listen. Jack looked at her. No, he said. We're finding it again. And this time they wouldn't silence the song. The sea was restless again. Outside the observation deck, the waters of Puget Sound heaved under the weight of a rolling storm. Winds howled across the dockyard, bending floodlight poles and tossing spray across the rails. The storm wasn't scheduled, at least not by weather services, but no one said it aloud. Everyone felt it. This wasn't coincidence. It was challenge. Inside the control center, the air was dry, still almost reverent. Engineers lined up at their stations, some with faces pale from tension, others wearing the polite detachment of people trying to act like nothing unusual was about to happen. But everything about this was unusual. The Orion Venture would sail under its own power again today. Evelyn Maddox stood in front of her team, shoulders squared beneath her tailored black coat. Her voice, when it came, was crisp and level. This is not a test flight, she said. This is a statement. She turned toward the viewing gallery where a wall of cameras waited, not to investors, not to press, to the machine itself. We're not running it by force today. We're asking it to trust us. A few engineers exchanged skeptical glances. Jack Rourke stood off to the side, arms crossed, saying nothing. His work was already done, or so they thought. He knew better. Because trust wasn't asked. It was earned. Below in the engine bay, Benji sat beside the stabilizer housing legs, swinging over the edge of the diagnostics platform. He had headphones on, connected not to music, but to a real-time feed of the turbine's micro-vibrations, a language no one else had ever truly learned. To him it wasn't a machine. It was a voice, learning how to breathe. Jack knelt beside him. You ready, kiddo? Benji nodded. She is. Jack blinked. How do you know? Benji tapped his chest. Because she's not humming afraid anymore. Jack swallowed. Then let's light her up. Engine ignition in T-minus 60 seconds. Evelyn's voice rang through the intercom. Her hands were steady on the master console, but her knuckles were white. Jack stepped up beside her. You still trust me. I never stopped. Even when I gave you reasons to. She turned her head, looked him in the eye. You didn't. You gave me truth. I just wasn't brave enough to stand in it before. They didn't say more. Some moments need silence more than answers. Powering up primary turbine. The ship rumbled. It started as a low hum deeper than anything man-made should be. It was the sound of purpose being awakened, of potential rising from steel bones, bringing up to 65% thrust. Monitors lit up across the deck, every number in the green. Benji's voice came through the private channel, still good. 75%. The hum shifted, not straining but adjusting, like breath drawn deeper into the lungs. 85%. That's when it happened. The lights flickered. A pressure alarm chirped twice, then fell silent. Jack tensed. Talk to me, Benji. The boy's voice was calm. She's not scared. She's just remembering. 90%. A beat. Another. Then nothing. Not failure. Not noise. Just smooth resonance. Jack looked to the screen. Every frequency aligned. Every pulse matched. He whispered, She's alive. A cheer erupted across the control deck. Evelyn exhaled for the first time in minutes. Shut it down slowly. Let her rest. One by one, systems powered down. Lights dimmed. The turbine spun to idle, then full stop. The Orion Venture had passed her trial, and this time no alarms, no ghosts. Just a quiet that felt like peace. In the aftermath, the mood turned strange, not celebratory, but reverent. Simon Vance, the lead systems engineer, who had once mocked Jack openly, approached him as the crew dispersed. Mr. Rourke. Jack turned, wiping his hands with a cloth. Simon extended a hand. Jack stared at it a moment, then took it. Simon said quietly, I designed half this engine. I thought I understood it. You did, Jack said. You just didn't listen close enough. Simon nodded. That boy of yours, he hears things I never will. Jack looked toward Benji, now sitting on the floor, drawing a spiral on a notepad. A pattern, he said, matched the engine's new heartbeat. I know, Jack said. That's why I don't try to teach him. I just follow when I can. Simon looked down. Thank you for reminding me what this was supposed to be. Jack didn't reply. Some confessions deserved their own silence. Later, Evelyn stood alone on the viewing deck watching the storm recede. Rain slid down the glass like old memories. Jack joined her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He offered one without a word. She took it, sipping slowly. How long do we have before the board tries to spin this as their victory? She asked. Jack smirked. They already started, I bet. Does it bother you? He shrugged. No one remembers who built the first violin. But everyone remembers the first song that made them cry. She looked at him, curious. And what song is this? He gestured to the ship. The kind you only hear once you've lost enough to stop pretending you know everything. She nodded, her voice softer. I never imagined this ending like this. Jack glanced sideways. Who says it's ending? Their eyes met, and in that gaze was something neither of them had let themselves feel in years. Permission. Not for romance. For hope. Back in the engine bay, Benji finished his spiral and drew a small heart in the center. He pressed his ear to the floor, closed his eyes, and smiled. She's smiling too, he whispered. And this time the ship didn't hum afraid. She hummed like something finally ready to move forward. The email came at 4:06 a.m. Subject line, confidential, immediate suspension of access. J. Rourke. Jack stared at the screen in the early grey light of morning, the words crisp and cold. No explanation. No signatures. Just a sterile PDF attached with his revoked clearance notice and a list of return instructions for equipment he never technically borrowed. He didn't curse, didn't blink. He simply closed the laptop, stood up from the metal cot in the guest quarters aboard the Orion Venture and began to pack. Benji stirred under a heavy wool blanket in the corner, half asleep. "We're leaving," he mumbled. Jack nodded. "Looks like it." "Did we do something wrong?" Jack's voice was calm but low. "No, kiddo. We just did something right. And that scares people." An hour later, Evelyn stormed into the dry, dark control room like a missile wrapped in silk. Her phone was already in her hand, her jaw clenched, eyes sharpened to a deadly focus. "Miles," she barked into the receiver. "Reverse the order." "Now." His voice crackled through the speaker, polished and venomous. "It's already executed. The board voted 5-2 last night. Jack Rourke is no longer authorized to access proprietary systems under Maddox Deep Systems." She stopped walking. "So this is how you do it behind my back while I sleep. I brought it to vote," Miles replied. "You didn't attend. You forfeited the chance to object." Evelyn's voice dropped an octave. "You're afraid of what he found." Miles was quiet for a beat too long. "Then he compromised our firewall, violated security protocol, and implicated the company in a legacy sabotage theory with no hard proof. We can't afford that liability. No, what you can't afford," Evelyn hissed, "is for someone to finally prove we bought our empire on a lie." Another pause. "Your loyalty?" "Evelyn is becoming expensive." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. She ended the call and turned to find Jack standing just inside the doorway, toolbox in hand, Benji at his side. "Don't," she said, voice cracking only slightly. "Don't walk away yet." Jack gave her a long look, already been walked out. "You built this ship's soul, Jack." He shrugged. "Didn't stop them from pulling the plug." She stepped closer. "I'll fight them." Jack looked down. "I know." She placed a hand over his on the toolbox handle. "But I don't want to fight without you." Jack glanced at Benji, who was watching them both with wide, quiet eyes, as if trying to memorize how adults choose between staying and surviving. "Don't make promises you can't keep," Jack said gently. "I'm not," Evelyn replied. "I'm making a choice I should have made 7 years ago." By noon, Evelyn had called an emergency press conference. No PR filters. No controlled statements. Just one podium, one microphone, and the entire engineering and security division of Maddox Systems gathered in the hangar's open-air deck, with media streaming in remotely from 5 countries. When Evelyn stepped up to speak, the rain had started again, not harsh, but steady. A curtain between truth and power. "I built this company with the belief that technology could carry us into a better future," she began, voice clear and strong. "But I was wrong to believe that future was built solely on algorithms and equations." She looked out over the sea of faces. Many were confused, some expectant, others afraid. "I'm here to tell you something this board never wanted said out loud. Our flagship vessel, the Orion Venture, carried inside her a flaw, not a technical oversight, but a deliberate insertion. A ghost in the code, built to fail under pressure." The murmurs began immediately. Evelyn raised her hand. "That ghost came from a legacy firm we acquired, and it was discovered not by our top engineers, not by our consultants, but by a man we discredited. And his son." She looked toward Jack, standing at the edge of the hangar, arms crossed. "I brought Jack Rourke back because I believed he could hear what we couldn't. What I didn't realize," she said, voice cracking slightly, "is that he was one of the few people brave enough to listen." Jack didn't move, but Benji, standing next to him, smiled. "The board has voted to remove Jack from this project," Evelyn continued. "I am telling you now, as the founder and CEO of Maddox Systems, that vote does not represent the future of this company, and it doesn't represent me." More murmurs. One of the senior engineers, Simon Vance, stepped forward from the crowd. Are you saying, he asked, voice loud and steady, that you're overruling the board? Evelyn met his eyes. I'm saying I'm dismantling it. Gasps, audible this time. She turned back to the microphone. This company cannot build a future if it buries the truth to protect the past. So effective immediately, I am launching a full review of every line of inherited code in our systems, every contract, every module, every ghost. And Jack, someone shouted. She turned to Jack, for once not as a CEO, just a woman who'd once run from a truth she couldn't face. I'm asking him to stay, not as a contractor, as a partner. Jack's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. A thaw, a recognition. He stepped forward slowly through the misted deck, every step echoing against metal and memory. When he reached her, he looked out at the crowd, then into the camera lenses, broadcasting live to shareholders, skeptics, and cynics alike. I didn't come back for a paycheck, he said simply. I came back because the ship asked me to. A pause, and when machines ask for help, it means the people behind them forgot how to care. The silence that followed was deep, then applause, not thunderous, but real. It spread slowly, then grew, then rolled through the hangar like a wave crashing against a dam of fear that had held too long. Evelyn turned to Jack. So you staying? Jack glanced at Benji. Benji grinned. We already unpacked. Jack chuckled. Then I guess we're staying. And just like that, the collapse they feared became the redemption they didn't know they needed. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the workshop aboard the Orion Venture was already humming. Not with machines this time, but with a quiet, pulsing rhythm that sounded oddly like a lullaby translated into vibration. Benji sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by old parts, copper wire, and a stripped-down diagnostics panel Evelyn had let him keep. His fingers were wrapped around a soldering tool, his lips pursed in concentration. He was building something. No one knew what yet, including Jack. Jack watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, still half listening to the rain tapping against the upper deck windows. Something about the boy's focus always silenced the chaos in him. Years in the Navy had taught Jack the value of precision, but Benji taught him the value of tuning in, not just tuning up. Evelyn entered behind him barefoot, her coat draped over her arm. She paused beside Jack and watched Benji work in silence. What is it? She whispered. Jack shook his head. He hasn't said. Just told me it's something she'll understand. She... meaning the ship, Jack smiled. That's what I figured. Benji looked up then as if hearing them without hearing them. It's not just for her, he said. It's for you too. Evelyn blinked. For me, Benji nodded. You were always listening, but you didn't have anything to hear with. She knelt beside him. And you're building me ears. Benji giggled. Sort of. He held up a small circuit board no bigger than his palm, with a coil wrapped around the center, and 3 prongs extending like little antennae. It's a resonance translator. It reads vibrations and turns them into patterns you can feel. Not sounds. Feelings. Evelyn looked at the board like it was a sacred artifact. You built this on your own, Benji shrugged. Dad taught me how to solder. Jack snorted. I taught him where not to burn his fingers. The rest is all him. Evelyn ran a thumb over the device's edge. What do you want me to do with it? Wear it, Benji said. Put it on your wrist. When the ship talks, you'll know if she's happy, or scared, or mad. Jack raised an eyebrow. You tested it. Benji nodded, dead serious. She smiled when I plugged it in last night. Evelyn looked at Jack. Should I be worried I'm being emotionally manipulated by a destroyer-class vessel? Jack smirked. Only if she starts writing poetry. Later that morning, Evelyn gathered the engineering team on deck too, the forward diagnostics bay. Not for a test run this time, for something more radical. Starting today, she said, pacing before a digital schematic of the Orion venture, we're no longer treating the engine as a component. We're treating it as a conversation partner. Simon Vance frowned. You're saying we talk to the turbine. I'm saying we stop assuming we already understand it. She held up Benji's resonance device. This translator was built by an 8-year-old in one night, and it detected a shift in pressure tension 5 seconds before our sensors did. It felt the machine flinch before the software noticed anything. Murmurs spread. Simon raised a hand. Are we changing our protocols based on intuition? Now, Jack stepped forward. Not intuition. Observation. Machines carry memory in motion. Every hum, every pause, every offbeat resonance is part of a vocabulary. It's not mysticism. It's mechanics at a frequency we forgot how to notice. Evelyn nodded. From now on, every diagnostic review will include a resonance map. Not just error logs. Not just code outputs. I want to know how she breathes. That night, Jack brought Benji to the upper deck, a place they rarely went, mostly because it was always filled with officials, donors, dignitaries. But tonight it was empty. The stars had come out after 3 days of storm. Above them, the sky stretched in silence. Around them, the water lapped against the hull like a lullaby. Benji lay on his back, staring up. Jack sat beside him, hands in his jacket pockets. You okay? Jack asked. Benji nodded. It's quiet, but not empty. Jack looked at him. What do you hear? Benji smiled. The ship's dreaming. Jack didn't speak for a long while. Then quietly, you know, I used to think people like you were fragile, that the world was too loud and fast for a mind like yours. Benji turned his head. But it's not. No, Jack said. It's just, most of us forgot how to slow down enough to meet you where you are. Benji looked up at the stars again. It's okay. I don't mind waiting. Jack swallowed, his voice thick. I'm proud of you. The boy turned and smiled. I know. Back below deck, Evelyn sat at her office console, sifting through pages of code logs. She was looking for something she didn't know what exactly. A pattern, a clue, a name. And then she found it. A flagged log from 6 years ago. Override. Sequence Maddox L2 auth. Her access code, triggered remotely by someone inside the company. She stared at the line for a long moment, then picked up her phone and called Jack. I found the trigger point. His voice was sharp. Who activated it? She hesitated. Miles. Silence. Then you sure his authorization stamp, hidden under the Sable subroutine? Jack exhaled. Then he knew all along. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. He didn't just bury the ghost. He fed it. Jack's voice dropped low. And now we know where the haunting started. But what they didn't know, not yet, was that Miles Harrow had already booked a flight to D.C. And in his briefcase was a copy of the Orion Venture's original source code, along with a proposal to sell the tech to a foreign defense conglomerate. He hadn't lost. He just started playing a different game. And this time he wasn't planning to lose again. The banners were already hanging by sunrise. Orion Venture. The future has a frequency. They fluttered in the coastal wind like declarations of hope, or at least ambition. Inside the Maddox Systems launch pavilion, a sleek glass structure perched above the dry dock media teams buzzed like hornets. Drones hovered for pre-show footage, and engineers in tailored blue jackets rehearsed their talking points, as if the ship itself might call them out for getting it wrong. Jack Rourke stood in the shadows of the maintenance corridor, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, watching it all like a man peering into a world he'd never quite belonged to. Think we overdid it? Evelyn asked beside him, holding a tablet under one arm. Jack gave a slow shake of the head. Depends. Is the show for the public or for the board? Evelyn smiled. This part, for the public. The next part, she paused. That's for everyone else. Jack nodded. He knew what was coming. She'd asked him to speak. 10 minutes before the official launch ceremony, Evelyn walked alone to the staging floor, where a crowd of investors, press and government representatives waited. The ship behind her glistened like a blade under sunlight, no longer a machine, haunted by silence, but a vessel reborn with intention. She took the podium. 7 years ago she began, this company made a promise to the world. We said we'd deliver a vessel unlike any other one that could dive deeper, travel farther, and respond faster than anything before it. She paused, eyes scanning the room. But we didn't deliver that ship 7 years ago, or 5, or 3. We didn't deliver it even last week. A murmur rippled through the audience. We couldn't, she continued, because the ship wasn't ready to sail, not because it wasn't finished, but because we weren't listening. Another pause. It took a man with no title, no clearance, no degree from a coastal tech institute, to show us that machines speak not in words, but in rhythms, in resistance, in pain, and in hope. She turned, gesturing toward the hangar doors. They parted slowly. Jack stepped into the light. No suit, no speech in hand, just denim and calluses, and the gravity of a man who'd lived long enough to know when silence said more than applause. He stood at the center of the stage. I'm not used to talking in front of people who wear lanyards, he began, and the audience laughed, unsure whether it was okay to do so. Jack didn't wait. My name's Jack Rourke. I fix things. He paused. Most of the time people think fixing something means replacing parts, or throwing money at it until the noise goes away. But real repair, real listening starts with slowing down. He tapped his chest gently. You ever hear your own heartbeat wrong? Just for a second. Like it skips. You notice it. You know something's off. But then it goes away. And you tell yourself it was nothing. He looked out at the audience. That's what this ship did. She skipped, and everyone said it was nothing, until it almost killed her. Silence. Jack pointed toward the Orion Venture. She's not just steel and fuel. She's a memory, a story. She remembers what you feed her, the greed, the silence, the arrogance. But she also remembers when someone finally listens, and that's when she starts to hum again. He nodded toward the control deck. My son built a device that let her tell us how she feels. Not thinks, feels. And she told us she didn't trust us. Not until we listened. Jack paused, then delivered the line that would be quoted in every press clipping the next day. You don't earn trust with silence. You earn it with frequency. The room fell utterly still. Then came the applause, not polite, not staged. Thunderous. After the ceremony, Evelyn met Jack on the observation deck as the Orion Venture slowly eased off the dry dock and into the open sea, its engines humming a frequency so pure it felt like music. She sails, Evelyn said softly. Jack nodded. She does. Benji came running up the gangway holding something in his hands. I added a new pattern, he told them, breathless with excitement. She adapted right away. Evelyn knelt beside him. What does this one say? Benji smiled. It says I'm not afraid anymore. Jack knelt too and put an arm around his son's shoulders. She's talking a lot now, he said. Benji nodded. Because we finally stopped interrupting. 2 hours later, Evelyn sat before the Maddox Systems internal review panel, the board still intact, but now powerless. She handed over a single envelope. What's this? Miles Harrow asked coldly. My resignation, she replied, effective immediately. Gasps. Harrow leaned forward. You're serious? I'm taking the Orion team independent. Jack's agreed to lead the engineering division. I'll handle operations. and the ship will be owned jointly by a public trust and a private foundation focused on ethical AI development and resonance research. She stood calm and clear. You tried to build an empire on silence. We're building something that sings. And with that, she left the board behind her, the past behind her, and the future wide open ahead. That evening, Jack stood at the aft of the Orion Venture as the ship began its first official mission, a deep-sea mapping operation off the Alaskan coast. Benji sat beside him, drawing spirals again. Evelyn leaned against the rail, sipping tea from a steel cup, barefoot, and smiling. You ever think she said that none of this would have happened if you'd just ignored the hum that night? Jack stared at the water. No, he said, because I've learned something. What's that? Jack looked at her, and for the first time truly let her see all the weight he'd carried and all the light he'd finally allowed back in. When something broken calls out to you, you answer. The sky over Tracy Bay was a soft silver brushed with the quiet gold of morning. Fog rolled lazily across the water, stretching its fingers along the dock, like someone reluctant to say goodbye. The Orion Venture was docked offshore, anchored, but humming alive in a way it had never been before. She no longer waited for permission to breathe. She knew who she was now. On the edge of the old wooden pier stood Jack Rourke, a mug of black coffee in hand, his boots planted firm on the worn planks. He wasn't thinking about machines, not this morning. He was listening to the way the ocean lapped gently against the beams, to the steady heartbeat of waves far beyond the breakwater, and to the soft footsteps behind him, small, deliberate, unmistakably his son's. Benji stood beside him, still in pajamas, holding his dragon print notebook, his hair stuck up like grass after rain. She's quiet today, the boy said. Jack nodded. She's resting. Or waiting. Jack smiled. Maybe both. They stood together, father and son, in a silence that wasn't empty, it was earned. Back at the dockside lab, Evelyn Maddox adjusted the strap on her duffel bag and checked her watch. A new team of researchers would arrive in 2 hours. Young minds, new eyes. None of them would know the ghosts this place had once carried, and that was the point. Leaving without saying goodbye, Jack's voice came from the doorway. She turned. Wouldn't dare. He stepped inside, hands in his pockets, a rare softness in his eyes. You're really going to build it? She nodded. A resonance institute. Not just for machines. For people too. For minds like Benji's. Places where we don't fix them, we let them teach us. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then, you're gonna need a damn good chief engineer. Evelyn smiled. You volunteering on considering a guest appearance. She took a step closer. You always knew how to listen, Jack, even when the world told you to shut it out. I stopped shutting things out the day Benji was born, he said, and the day you came back to that workshop. I remembered what listening felt like. A pause. Then Evelyn reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver medallion. On it, engraved in delicate lines, was a spiral the same pattern Benji had drawn 100 times over. She pressed it into Jack's hand. It's the ship's final log tone, she said. The one Benji tuned. We made a medallion for everyone who helped bring her back. You should have the first one. Jack looked down at it, thumbing the edges. What's it say? Evelyn smiled gently. It says, I remember who I am. Later that afternoon, the Orion Venture pulled away from the dock, not with fanfare this time, but with the kind of grace that didn't need to be seen to be real. Jack, Evelyn, and Benji stood at the stern, watching the coastline shrink behind them. Wind in their faces. Salt on their skin. No speeches. Just motion. Benji pointed toward the open water. Where are we going? Evelyn looked at Jack. Somewhere worth listening to. Jack knelt beside his son. You ready? Benji grinned. Always. and as the ship cut through the water, its engines whispered, not with struggle, not with fear, but with something new. Something like freedom, that night, far from any port. Jack sat alone on the top deck, under a sky full of stars. The kind of stars you only saw when everything else was finally quiet. He closed his eyes and pressed the medallion to his chest, the way someone might press a photograph to their heart. He thought of all the sounds that had once haunted him, the groan of failing turbines, the accusation in silence, the words he never got to say when they took his name from the registry. But all of it had led here. The boy he feared wouldn't fit into the world had helped change it. The woman he thought he'd lost to ambition had chosen something truer. And the man he used to be broken, discarded, was finally whole again. From somewhere below deck, the faint sound of humming rose Benji's voice, singing to himself in the resonance of the ship. A melody with no words, but filled with meaning. Jack smiled through the mist in his eyes. Machines hum when they work. But this one was singing. People spend their lives trying to build things that last. Jack would later tell a group of young apprentices at the Resonance Institute. But sometimes what matters more is learning to hear what's already there, and knowing when it's asking you to believe in it again. As the Orion venture sailed deeper into the unknown, it left behind no scars, no secrets, no ghosts. Only a trail of white waves, and a legacy of listening. And that's where our story comes to a close, not with fireworks or applause, but with the quiet hum of a ship that found its voice again, and the hearts that learned to listen. If this story touched you in any way, a single moment, a line of dialogue, or simply the feeling of being understood, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always a joy to see how far these stories travel and how deeply they connect us across distance and time. If this isn't your first time here, or if you feel like you found a quiet corner of the internet where you belong, we warmly invite you to subscribe. No pressure, just more stories like this told with heart, made for those who appreciate the beauty in second chances, quiet strength, and the music between the words. Thank you truly for spending your time with us, for listening, for feeling, for being here. Wherever you are tonight, may you carry a little more peace. And always know when something inside is asking to be heard.